Welcome back to the Green Dispensary Marketing GDM Podcast. My name is Samuel Fisher, co-founder here at Green Dispensary Marketing, always trying to talk to the best entrepreneurs in the space. And today I'm going to be talking with Anthony Domangue. He's the co-founder and CEO over at Southern Roots Genetics. He started way back in 2018 when Missouri was freshly legalized under medical marijuana. He's a husband. He's actually the wife of Caitlin Domangue, who works over at Flow Hub. He's also a father of 3, and so he started out growing cannabis on his own and worked his way up to being a growing expert and consultant, and now doing some marketing work for cultivation groups. I'm super excited to talk with him, learn more about him, and also dive into some cultivation, some of the cool stuff they're doing over at Southern Roots Genetics. How are you doing today, Anthony?
I'm doing awesome, Sam. Yourself?
Doing great. So really excited to talk with you. I've been trying to get a cultivation expert on this podcast for a long time, so super excited to be chatting with you. We're going to get into that in a second here. Before we get started, I'm kind of interested to learn a little bit more about you. And I was stalking you on the internet a little bit, and I saw a story that when you were 17, that you actually witnessed cannabis help someone from seizures and to find relief from seizures. Can you go back to that story? I'm interested to learn more.
For sure. So, growing up, I'm originally from Houston, Texas, born and raised there, lived the first 20-ish years of my life there. So, in high school, my first hands-on experience putting my head down and studying cannabis was actually in a health class where I was assigned to research LSD and cannabis. It was just a general health class, that you need to take to leave high school. So it was unexpected to be assigned to look that up, having gone through the DARE program and being in a very traditional family. I was an athlete. Cannabis was like the last thing on my mind. So that was very interesting. Started to learn that it's just not entirely bad, right? On a general level, I'm learning that there are benefits. Doing my own research after having those thoughts start to sort of bubble up in me, connecting with some people online long time ago, and they essentially shared their stories with me of, my life was so much of a lesser quality without this medication, and no pharmaceutical could help me like this plant could. That really, I think, was the first piece that solidified my deep interest in cannabis, because we were told one thing for sure 10, 15 years ago. And though we still hear a lot of that reefer madness even now in the Texas Senate, with their move to potentially make it a felony to have any sort of form of THC.
I haven't heard about this. Is this a brand new development? When did this happen? I'm sorry for cutting you off. I didn't hear about that.
This is a very recent. I believe it's right now. It's being backed by a large MSO to essentially make, again, all forms of THC illegal. Just help these larger MSOs, I think, over time, create some sort of monopoly in Texas. And it's unfortunate, because I was listening to testimonies from Texas citizens, and just to hear the deep sadness and pain in people's voices, demanding that we study this plant more, as if we don't already know all the amazing things that cannabis can do. It really, it speaks to the feeling I have each time I go back home, which is like when I go back home to Texas, I feel like I'm stepping into the cannabis past, right? And it's still very much so true today. But even while I was there, just to tap back into the original question, I was learning a ton about cannabis, experimenting for myself, and again, coming into contact with people who were actually using it, and it was benefiting their life, right? I was just very early into it, a teenager, experimenting, learning, and luckily came into contact with someone, like I said, who was suffering from just these awful seizures, but with a tincture, their life was made so much better. So that was huge for me early on in my cannabis understanding. I was like, wow, it's not just, proven once or whatever in the study that I read, like this is like really changing many different people's lives, and not just on the level of seizures, but many other things.
Yeah, well, it seems like first you saw firsthand, the healing, the medical benefits that cannabis can have, and then it seems like you kind of got a personal interest out of that, and eventually you evolved this into a career. And so I was reading up that right around 2018, right when Missouri legalized cannabis medically, you got into doing your first home grow. What was that like? Your first time doing your home grow, and what were some of the mistakes that you made right away?
That was an interesting process. So I had such a passion for cannabis at this point, had been a long time consumer by the time that I had started my first grow. So I was ready to just dive straight in and get more intimate with the plant. But in doing so, and in having basically no basis of knowledge to go off of at all, I order pretty cheap little blurple LED off of Amazon. I'm getting little peat pellets from the Home Depot and get into business on a very, very basic level. Fast forwarding 1 year on that home grow process, as I'm like just starting to play with veg plants, I break my neck in 2019. Yeah, 2019.
You broke your neck?
I broke my neck, yes. So though, through my 17-year-old self up to that 2018 period, I had been using cannabis and noticing that it would help for, just giving me a general calm. It definitely helped like body pain or whatever. Cannabis became a much more important medicine for me after breaking my neck. So it was a freak accident sort of thing. But after 5 days in the hospital and being doped up on opioids and various things and being prescribed opioids, and it was a total of 5 or 6 medications leaving the hospital, I just decided on a personal level to not fill the prescriptions and to only use cannabis as medicine. So I've been exclusively using cannabis as medicine for my neck pain since then, outside of physical therapy stretches and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm assuming this is also cannabis that you grew at home, that you cultivated yourself, right?
Say one more time.
This was cannabis.
That early time period, it was a blend. It was a blend of my grow and then outsourcing. I was definitely still dialing in, what parameters are solid for yielding enough cannabis for me to just support my own habits, right? So it was definitely like a combo of my bud and other people's bud. But
yeah, it's a
way, I learned a lot then. I learned that most of our receptors for THC are in our spine in the first place. So I was like, wow, this is like really, this stuff is so medicinal for me right now. And I could feel it as I smoke, and my muscle spasms would subside, or my neuropathy would greatly decrease. But yeah, even to this day, I get great relief from that.
No, hell yeah. Obviously, you got really good at growing cannabis really fast. That's kind of what I was asking, if this is your own cannabis that you're using, because, you work for several different companies, I would imagine, as a grower. Correct me if I'm wrong here. And then you eventually decided to jump out on your own and do this whole Southern Roots genetics thing. And so I'm curious, what exactly do you think gave you the confidence to do that? Is it just being around other people, seeing the SOPs, and seeing them do some really kick-ass grows? Or what exactly led you to jump out and do your own thing?
So awesome question. I think that the answer to that really did come with reps. Having that experience in different indoor grow chambers, having experience in greenhouse with different genetics, different parameters. One of the beauties of scale is that you learn so quickly. You have lots of different rooms going on, different growth stages, usually a high volume of plants. So I learned a lot really quick, and being that it was a desire of mine, even back in Texas, to eventually create genetics that could help people and, maybe develop combinations that aren't created yet, right? That might serve people in a better way. So, for example, when I was thinking this way back when, I was like, okay, I can have a variety sometimes that really hits it for me. It does the job, does it quick, does it in one bowl, or, less than a joint, whatever. It's medicinal for me. Whereas sometimes I might need to combine a few different varieties to make that same effect happen. So it's just been deep in the back of my mind for a while to, one day after, getting my footing, to create worthwhile, unique genetics for different people to experience, just both on, just the enjoyment side and then also the, improvement on the quality of life side. So.
Yeah, I was just talking with you before we started pressing record here, and we were talking about how you knew how to make some new strains, how you've been making some new stuff that's resistant to different types of growing conditions. And we'll get into that in a second here, because I think that's going to be a really interesting topic. But real quick, before we dive into that, what's the story behind Southern Roots Genetics? Where's the brand name come from?
Totally. Well, again, I'm here in the Midwest, and while, some people might consider it in the South, I'm from the deep South, and I thought that was a fitting name for my brand. I'm representing for all the people down there who are passionate about cannabis and the people who I learned and grew up with. But yeah, it's just sort of speaks to me and my inception with cannabis. I guess that's where the name came from.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's get into that. And so let's go ahead and break into the topic of cultivation. This is an art, man. You can try to pick up and grow your own cannabis, but until you get some really big successful grows in your belt like you do, you're not going to be really doing anything at the level that some of these medical quality dispensaries and these big product providers are giving. And so let's see if we could get some of the meat or some of your processes or some of the secrets that you got going on, is what you can share. But I'm curious, what are some of the main SOPs right now that are going on in cultivation that you think are the most important for cannabis cultivators?
For sure. So right now, and I would say over the last 5 or so years, there's been a huge transition from HID lighting to LED lighting.
Uh-huh. Can you break down the difference between those two real quick, just for somebody who's dumb like myself who barely even, lighting. What's HID? Totally. What's LED?
So if you're familiar with some older grow photographs where there's sort of this yellowish, orangish hue going on, those are your HID or high intensity discharge fixtures, and very common. They're used in street lamps. They've been used for many different uses over time. They're very efficient, for decades at being one of the most efficient, indoor supplemental lighting options. But with the advent of different LED technologies, the LED game has vastly improved. I really do concede to the fact that HIDs were the superior at one point, and I think they still make excellent cannabis. But where a lot of commercial cultivators are taking advantage of this new technology is in the fact that when you use an HID fixture and you push upwards of about 1,000 micromoles of light intensity, you can't go much further without creating this detrimental heat load to your plant canopy and then causing issues with, flower quality, flower yield, things like that. So they tend to stay under a threshold, which can limit them on yield with a lot of these modern hybrid genetics that are available today. And I'll say that with recent studies in the last few years coming out proving that cannabis has a linear increase in yield through its light saturation point, I think that a lot of people are essentially leaving money on the table by not opting to go with an LED that can push light intensity a little bit harder, because that light intensity is, in layman's terms, like the gas pedal for plant metabolism and producing weight. And the more you're able to push that without bothering the plant, the better. Not every genetic is going to respond well to high light intensity, but I will say that is one thing that a lot of commercial operators are focusing on right now, seeing what can push those high light intensity thresholds and in turn taking advantage of that exponential yield increase. So that is one huge thing. I would say that irrigation technology as a second bit has really improved. one company I really mess with is Arroya. They specialize in substrate sensors and crop steering technology to essentially just help growers go from watering pots up, letting them dry back a little bit, and going back to it again, to having a calculated science on how much water we're distributing at each time of day, throughout the day, on different phases of life, and all in an effort to just maximize that genetic, right? So, for example, when you're watering your pot in very heavy every time and might even see a little bit of runoff at the bottom, what you're effectively doing is you're lowering that nutrient concentration a little bit too much within your substrate. So whether it's cocoa rock wool, potting media, you're lowering that nutrient concentration, which can be problematic as you enter flower and as you're going into mid-flower when you want your EC to be higher as your plant's trying to build up that biomass. So one thing that this crop steering technology has allowed people to understand is that if you have a bunch of small shots that are about 1 to 3% of the size of your substrate, that is going to encourage very fast, vigorous vegetative growth when you're in veg. And that's also the perfect strategy to use when you're in mid-flower and yielding a ton of bud. So
yeah, there's a lot of rabbit holes we can go down into here. This is a big topic. You were talking about the vegetative stage, or flowering stage, all that. Let's kind of go back to the seed. And so, as you know, there's different types of seeds. I don't know maybe if you personally work with them, but we have the autoflowering seeds, we have the feminized seeds, we have the photoperiod seeds. In your experience, knowing what you know and seeing what you've seen, which is the best for both potency and also yields? What do you say?
I would argue that to the credit of the autoflower game, the autoflowers have vastly improved in recent years. We've seen potency increases, yield increases, but at the end of the day with autoflowers, it's like a determinate tomato, right? It has a determined lifetime, a determined yield, and any sort of mistakes that you make, it's a very unforgiving situation on a level, right? Because you lose time that you can't get back. Whereas with photoperiod genetics, I've just noticed, again, you have the ability to keep something in veg if you have a 1 or 2 day delay in production time. Veg it out a little bit more to keep your plant height on target or whatever. Forgive me, I spaced.
No, different types of seeds. Which ones are best for potency and yields, and why?
Yes. So with a photoperiod plant, you are in control as far as determining that yield much more. You have the ability to create a much larger plant canopy with less plants. So again, autoflowering and photoperiod genetics can be similar in terms of yield, depending on like your grow setup and what your limitations are. Potency, especially, I would argue that they're pretty on point. Some autoflowering genetics, due to that ruderalis presence, might have a little bit less THC, but again, the game is improving quickly on the autoflower side, so that's something that you really can't hold true for too much longer. I think potency compares, but when it comes to yield, it's no question that photoperiod genetics they ultimately have the potential to yield you more, so long as you have the time and space to do so.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point. I'm going to kind of butcher your words here, but with photoperiod, you have a little bit more control over the stages that you're in, whereas, autoflower, again, correct me if I'm wrong, or speeding out some bullshit here. It moves based on the age of the plant as opposed to the lighting cycle that you give. And so it really makes it, as I would see it, probably easier for beginner cultivators of these autoflower seeds. What do you think?
100%. Autoflowers and feminized seeds are certainly going to be a more user-friendly option for the beginning gardener. And it is so interesting. Some people are like, how do autoflowers, how are they even a thing? And for those who don't know, there's cannabis sativa and there's cannabis ruderalis. And the ruderalis basically developed in nature, and what it did was it just developed this internal clock of things and realized over time, I can't wait a long time to flower and to reproduce. I need to reproduce much quicker, and I need to have this determined time. So when people are looking to make autoflower genetics, sometimes they'll directly source like a pure ruderalis and start to work that into a photoperiod line, make fast photos, and then it eventually will become this autoflower. But yeah.
What were the topic
I definitely
of?
agree with you. It's more user friendly. For sure.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I'm not an expert grower by any means. I've never actually done it grow by myself, but people hire me to sometimes write about how to grow weed or whatever. And so, I learned a thing or two that way. But kind of getting back on topic here. We were talking about potency and yields. I'm curious. What other SOPs do you notice? There's some low stress training techniques, high stress training techniques. Toppings, screen of greens, the scrog, that sort of stuff. What are some of your favorites? What do you personally use, and what do you recommend to your clients?
For sure. So my general protocol with plant training is to I will top plants at about a foot, and I like to do that mostly for all my mothers, regardless of strain, just so I can really start to encourage an open canopy really early. But I like to have at least a foot of meristem before I do that, because we're wanting to support a rather large plant, maybe 4-foot mom or something like that. So want a nice little meristem before we start to have it fork off everywhere. But yeah, topping is the first thing that I would say that I implement with a slight defol that same day. And we're doing this when plants are a foot to a foot and a half tall. For production plants, the topping will vary. Some varieties have an excellent structure, and their apical dominance isn't so much so that they look like a Christmas tree with barely any side branching coming out. Some plants are just excellent at, they make a beautiful structure without ever being topped. But some plants really need to have that top cut off to redistribute hormones inside the plant and have those secondary branches come up and make a more even canopy, right? So on production plants, it really does vary. Some genetics are awesome. Some I need to do that with. Defoliation I also use as a tool. Defoliation, when we strip leaves, it messes with that internal hormone balance, and we reshift the gibberellins to where it encourages our plants to stretch. If we remove leaves, it's going to want to grow up and create more biomass to account for what was just lost. So defoliation I love to use on really stout varieties, especially as I'm preparing for flower. Give them like an extra defol to try and get them to catch up with the rest of the bunch. But outside of that, I try to keep veg pretty minimal on defoliation unless it's needed. I would say every 2 weeks the plants could use like a little bit of topping or defol just as a maintenance thing. But when we go to flowering, which is really where a lot of the meat and potatoes is, I think, like, yes, you need a solid veg to like have a good flower, but flower is its own science. Veg is one type of growing, but within flowering, you have a few different phases that are all very different. And what I like to do is after I've set my plant up for success in veg, whether it's a more stout variety, whether it can just go by itself without topping, I will let them all ride and just let them go until stretch is done. And for most of the varieties I'm working with, they're going to be 9-week varieties. I do have some that go quicker, some that are longer, but especially at work in these commercial spots, you're usually working with 8 or 9 weekers. So that stretch period will end at roughly day 18 to 21. And that's when I'm hitting them with a major defoliation event. And that's really a huge key to maximizing yield when we're in these rooms. I think that
you said defoliation is a huge key.
Defoliation is massive, yeah, for a few different reasons. But the timing is everything as well of that defoliation. I would say like it's both things. So you have, you could defoliate before stretch ends, and what that will do if you have a stretchy variety, will make it stretch even more. And that could be problematic. You could have plants running into the lights or getting too close to the fixture. It's not good. So if you do it too late, you're eating into your yield if you're doing it from week 4 to 6, let's say, during that mid-flower period, because that's the time where your plants want to be building biomass. The first 3 weeks, you're setting flowers. And then when you do that week 3 defol, you're really sort of shocking them and sending them into that mid-flower in a very generative way. Because what I've noticed is if you don't over defoliate, then your plants will just make for huge flowers with a pretty nice bud to leaf ratio. If you over defoliate, and what I mean by that is basically taking all the leaves off even through that top cola. Like if you take leaves off into that top inflorescence, that's really where it's problematic, where it's too much. And you'll notice during mid-flower that your plants are pushing through more sugar leaves than they normally would. And that sometimes can cause people to want to be like, okay, I want a day 42 defol as well, or this thing is a lot leafier than it normally is. That's usually why it's just too much of a defol. But if you just pop to the bottom of that top cola, then you're good every time. I've seen it across so many genetics. I mean, there are a handful that will obviously do well with a bit more foliage on there, that break this rule. But I can confidently say that most of the varieties that you'll work with will really benefit from stripping every leaf from bottom to top, or from the bottom of the plant to the bottom of that top cola. Stripping branching is an entirely different thing, though, which really costs people a lot of yield. I think that a lot of people are over stripping their plants there. I worked with a lighting company, Fos, out of Las Vegas, and we worked very closely with this scientist out of the University of Guelph who's doing studies on light intensity. And what he recommended to us is that so long as we keep a minimum light intensity value on our lowest flowers of roughly 300 to 400 micromoles, and we're hitting 1200 at the top, then we're going to have a pretty uniform batch size. But it's when those light intensity values vary so much that we start to see, we see like some A nugs, we see a lot of B nugs, we see a lot of larvae. Like the batch size tends to improve if you do this defoliation and debranching properly at the end of stretch. But outside of that, they're riding to harvest day. That's like my last touch point. I'll do some low stress training, ideally through some trellis netting if, the facility allows for that. Definitely at home. I always set up the trellis. And yeah.
No, yeah, love it.
I would say that those are all of the plant training techniques that I typically implement. There's obviously some emergency super cropping that can take place. I remember my first time running a GMO, which stretches a good 3 times the flip height. That thing was getting out of control and getting really close to the lights. So I had to, very carefully without, breaking the internal structure of the stem, just make sure that thing was bent down and had a little knuckle at the end of the day. But yeah, I tried not to implement too much super cropping. I know some growers recommend it as common practice, but typically not necessary just in the spots that I've been in or the way that I've been doing things.
Yeah, you just spit out a ton of knowledge that, I would imagine went over a lot of growers' heads. A lot of it went over my head, just to be honest with you. Which is case in point why people should be talking to you, should be talking to Anthony Domangue and, getting some consulting help with their growing just to make sure that, we're doing things like maximizing these yields, maximizing the potency of our products, just making good products. And so going back, talk about products, let's talk a little bit more about your products. And so I was looking at your website, you have this crop steering course. This is something you were talking about briefly, but we didn't really get into what this is and what exactly that looks like. So what is crop steering? What's this course that you got going on?
So crop steering, I argue that all growers are steering their crop with your environment, with your irrigation, with your lighting. Some of us will be doing it deliberately, and some of us are just doing it, right? And what the Crop Steering 101 course is great for is giving growers a basis of understanding in some irrigation basics, lighting basics, environmental steering basics, that allow you to understand what you're doing when you're toggling those settings. What's going to happen to plant morphology or flower yield when you use a certain light spectrum or you use a certain irrigation frequency, right? And so to some, I give that description and they're like, it just sounds like good gardening. But at the end of the day, these strategies, what I would call it is just precision gardening, precision irrigation techniques, things like that. But this has been long used in traditional horticulture, especially in tomato crops, to dial in their yields. And I think the reason why crop steering is such an important tool these days in cannabis is the market is only getting more competitive, especially in your more old school markets like that have been around for a long time. Your Calis, Washington, Oregon, price per pound is very low. Any edge that you can get on your competition is going to benefit your business. And more product to sell is often the key for many spots, because with whatever parameters they are used to running and with whatever licensure square footage they have, they're maxed out and they don't know what better they can do. And often it just takes a few tweaks to what you're doing, because the plant, it's a living entity as much as it can be looked at as like, a sort of biological factory as well. It is a living entity that responds to the cues we give it. And if we're giving it either mixed signals at one time or the wrong signal at the wrong time, we're doing a disservice to ourselves ultimately at the end of the day. So this crop steering course really allows growers to pair the right cues at the right time to the right genetics to maximize performance.
Yeah, I love it. Another thing that you kind of are really knowledgeable on, and I imagine that you also kind of package into some consulting, is this whole process and SOPs for making new strains. So, you're talking about ways that you could stand out in a market. What's a better way to stand out in a market than having your own strain? And so can you break down what that looks like? There's some way you can tell us about making your own strain and kind of how you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to making your own genetics, my philosophy first behind it all is plenty of people are out there making new genetics and crossing things together, taking a male plant and a female plant, mixing them to make seed, or they're taking a female plant, doing a process called reversal, and creating feminized seed via that. But really the differentiator comes with a true understanding of cannabis genetics, an understanding of where cannabis genetics have come from, because what we effectively have today is we have plenty of good strains that come from this process, but we've essentially reached a bottleneck on flavor, aroma, and feel on the strains we can get at the dispensary.
Why is that? Sorry, I'm cutting you off. You're probably going to just answer that same question. Yeah, go ahead.
We've definitely reached this bottleneck because of breeding practices that are only seeking mixing modern hybrids with other modern hybrids, mixing the next hype cut with the next hype cut that comes out. Like, okay, we'll take the permanent marker to the sherb and then we'll mix it with the next thing that's hot. And while that has genuinely created some amazing varieties that I know and love, what many people would agree with is that the feeling that you get from these strains is often a very linear feeling. The high it will last for a little bit, but not too long. And the reason being is because we are in this race for THC, for color, and, for these hype names in these new strains. So what we've done is we've just created a limited flavor profile, a limited aroma profile, and a limited feeling, basically. And that, it leaves a lot of people wanting. So my whole thing when I started Southern Roots was like, done a ton of studying about not only the old school varieties, but deeper, cultivated land-raised varieties. And I know how the flavor profile, the different compounds they bring to the table make for a very long-lasting, medicinal, unique, high, and the flavor profile also, you can't find it these days because you can only mix sweet with sweet with sweet and candy gas with candy gas for so long before that's all you're getting from the profile. And again, they're excellent in their own regard, but people are getting tired of them and starting to have disdain for these great strains because we're not providing enough to the market. So I like to mix the old school with the new, and that usually creates for something truly unique.
Yeah. Do you think that there's like kind of a bad scenario in which maybe, I don't know, somebody's playing with genetically modified terpenes or doing some weird stuff with genetics to kind of push the limits on what you're talking about here with the flavor and the aroma profiles, and then simultaneously maybe also THC? Is this something that you thought about doing or that you fear might happen, or what do you think about that topic?
It's certainly something that I fear is in the works as we speak. Which entities exactly, I'm uncertain, but I've heard through the grapevine that there are a few entities out there very interested in working with genetically modified cannabis, all in an effort to do what big ag has done for a long time with no sweat. Just okay, like let's genetically modify this tomato to make it resistant to this bacteria or this fungi or whatever. We just personally, that's not going to be my mission in breeding. It'll always be, regular seed or normal feminization, open pollinations, stuff like that. And again, not to super demonize the process of the GMO, but in cannabis, at least, I think that, selective breeding can go a long way. I think we're trying to cut corners a little bit with the genetically modified processes. And because at the end of the day, it's first to have rights to things, and it's first to get things patented. So, there are definitely people with pockets who are looking to make this happen. But yeah, I think that it's something that is on the horizon that the cannabis industry should be wary of, that we should be proactive against, at least in this stage for now. I fear that direction.
Yeah,
I do know there are plenty of good breeders like myself and my friends who are they're loyal to the tried and true ways of breeding. And, with hard work, with years of working these lines, we do have things that are mold resistant, are PM resistant, are this and that.
Yeah. That's actually something I wanted to break into. I love your philosophy with, you kind of stick it to the classic, the proven ways of doing it. And of course people, they're going to want to push the limits, and, they're going to make some pretty sketch products, maybe, as it sounds, from based on the projections that you're predicting here. And, all power to them, whatever. I'm personally not going to try them until, we get like a better picture of what they're actually doing. And, I would prefer to be using strains from people like Southern Rich Genetics that are trying to do this organically, in a sense. But I wanted to break into this topic of you're really good at helping breed varieties that thrive in different environments, whether it be indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, that sort of stuff. And so I'm kind of wondering how that works, what that looks like. And specifically, I think it's interesting that you're able to do this in a manner that's, organic. But I'm talking a little bit too much. And can you break that down? How that works? How are you making different varieties that work in these different environments and what that looks like?
For sure. So I take a few different approaches through the process. First would be just intense study of the varieties that I'm going to be using for the parental lineage in the first place. For example, I was blessed with some 2023 Pakistani landrace collections that are pretty mold resistant. They're in an area that, it's pretty nasty, and they do excellent. So it's things like that I take into consideration on the front end with the varieties that I'm using. Beyond that, we go into a trial phase, right? We have to actually make the genetics, we'll cross the parents together and run those seeds. And as we're running those seeds, we'll put them through various stress tests, and we'll do that in different environments. So, for example, with our Southern Comfort, it's this Indiana bubblegum crossed to a Southern Sugar by Exotic Genetics. This one has been one that's proven itself outdoor, indoor, and greenhouse. And we only got there through, having them in a variable environment where, there's a humidity swing. What's going to happen? And, we're testing things thereafter, send it off to the lab. They test for microbials. And then we're like, okay, after so many runs of success of this thing, for me, I'm deeming it, resistant. That is not like, lab deemed resistant, but after many lab results and trials, I will be like, okay, you can have confidence that this strain is going to do fine in greenhouse environments, even where you might have, environmental swings, especially outdoor where you have environmental swings. It's a 3-step process sort of really doing some study on the front end, rigorous trial, after the seeds have been made, and then third-party testing on the back end to just ensure that our findings are correct. As it's coming, as the science and testing advances and genetics advance, we're going to be looking to partner with labs eventually where we can get that true certification of like, okay, this is resistant to Fusarium, or this is resistant to these strains of powdery mildew, so that just growers have that much more confidence in what we're giving them.
Yeah, no, and I think that's one of the valuable things that you do is you not only do consulting, but you also sell many of these seeds. And so, while you're simultaneously building these great seeds that are resistant to different environments, building your own strains, you actually eventually then come up with your own products and your own seeds. And so I'm kind of curious, what are some of the seeds and the strains that you're currently working on that you're most excited about?
I'm glad you asked. So I'm currently working on a project. It's a Tahiti lime project. There was a local event actually here, Pre-Seed Day, a few days ago, where I was able to give out 3 of the 9 varieties that I'll be releasing here in 2 months. But the Tahiti lime is an archive seed variety, and that is a Moonbow 25 crossed to a lemon lime. It has really like a lime peel, Skittles kind of front end, and then a super gassy, dank back end. And that one really served my pain needs, which I took into consideration when I made this line. Really helped with just I have a super tense neck, or I have the muscle spasms actively kicking in. That really just makes everything subside. So I took the Tahiti lime line, or Tahiti lime male, to the old school Blue Dream, and I made one called Blueberry Mojito. That's what I call it. And it's a nice best of both worlds. You get a nice gentle front end, and it takes you down the roller coaster gently into a body high. I have crossed the Purple Sunset by Ethos to the Tahiti lime. I'm going to be taking the Tahiti to Donut Glaze by Ziploc, a variety that I have held on to for the last 3 or 4 years called Brass Monkey, which is a Grease Monkey crossed to Berry Pie.
Just thinking of the Beastie Boys song.
Oh yeah, I've been milking it online with that. When I promote Brass, I'll throw Beastie Boys on there. But no, there's really so many awesome genetics that I'm working with right now. This is more of it's a split kind of half fully modern, half old school to modern line. But the next line I'm working is going to have a bunch of different landrace genetics in it. Some of those Pakistani collections. I'm going to have a Congolese that I'm going to be working outdoor in a separate project as well. And the Congolese is interesting because I literally can't do that one inside. It will flip 8 times the height that it is whenever it goes into flower. And for perspective, for those who might not know, most strains are usually going to double in height whenever, based on the size that they are when you move them into flower. If they're 2.5 feet, they're probably going to end up around 4 to 5 feet tall. So this Congolese, I could flip it at 1 foot. It would still end up at 8. Like this one's really tall, true sativa landrace. So I'm going to be using that in a project to try and create an outdoor mold resistant variety for this area. Because that's something that our area is lacking in right now, and what's been sort of my MO for figuring out since I've started this breeding project. I want to figure out how growers in this area can just throw a plant outside and have success and have a good feeling and good weight from it. But it's not without trial and error and many seasons of growing. So a long-term project, but Missouri will have some nice mold-resistant, unique pot soon.
Yeah, love it. That's actually another rabbit hole that we could have gone down, is fighting mold and being more mold resistant, and having which strains are most mold resistant. There's another reason should look at talking to Anthony for his consulting and education resources and that sort of stuff to kind of help you out through the steps of the process, because there's 100 billion different things that can go wrong, and mold is just one of them. But you also do some more so some other work on the side, with Southern Roots Genetics, with all this great work that you're doing with the seeds and the consulting and information. You also do some marketing work. Can you break that down a little bit?
Yes, for sure. So Southern Roots Genetics, ultimately, as much as I am like the brainchild of the horticulture side, I work as a 2-person team with my wife. She is excellent and heads up a lot of our marketing and business admin stuff, but we work collaboratively to help different cannabis companies market their business better. Whether you're an ancillary business, whether you're a cultivation facility, manufacturing facility, it doesn't matter. We help improve ROI. We help improve the SEO, just improve your, showing up on Google. For those who don't know what that means, I know you know what that means, but
yeah. I run an SEO. You're my competitor, man. I shouldn't be even having you on here. Just messing with you. I love it. Just helping people get more money in marketing ROIs. Love it, man. Love it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking forward. We're working with the people that you've been working with. We're wrapping up here. We've been kind of going into a lot more rabbit holes than I thought we'd go into. But this has been a really great discussion. But continuing on here, working with the people that you've seen, seeing some of the people make some of the biggest mistakes, and I would imagine you've seen some people make some just great decisions that ultimately boosted the success of their business. What's working in 2025 regarding marketing, and what's not?
So the cannabis audience is very, very good at sniffing out authenticity, right? So I think the biggest key for marketing in 2025 is to sort of throw in the trash almost your marketing plan that you've had the last couple of years that is not working. Like, it's not working for a reason. I find that a lot of companies, especially ancillary businesses, will take a very generalized approach at a very niche industry, and that's where the issues go wrong. You really have to have, I would argue, somebody who is a consumer or deeply passionate about cannabis at the very least, even if they don't consume. I met a bunch of awesome people in the industry who are they love cannabis. So, but yeah, you have to have somebody who has an understanding of the industry and an understanding of the audience that you're speaking to, because the second you're sniffed out as being inauthentic, the cannabis industry will blacklist you. And that's just what it is. The cannabis industry is going to play on one of two sides of the extreme, and that's going to be deeply passionate about what you do, or I could care less. I don't believe what you're doing. So that was part of the reason I was hired as our social media coordinator at FOS. I did horticulture work there, but also worked on the marketing side. And one of the things they needed was they just needed their message to come from a place that was authentic. So when we were talking about lighting, talking about yields, all this stuff, and how the lights could help that, it helped to have somebody behind the keyboard who just understood how the market is going to perceive that message. Because, you can use traditional marketing tactics and be like, oh, my light's going to yield you freaking 10 pounds a light or whatever. And, while big, catchy, sort of statements like that can tend to work in other sectors, this industry is quick to call BS. And you just have to come off the right way. So for me, authenticity is number one when it comes to marketing in cannabis.
Yeah, love it.
And understanding your audience.
Love it. Great stuff. A lot of people, just go the route of trying to get accepted into the group, whereas, in the path, they kind of lose touch with themselves and not being authentic. I think that's actually a really great piece of advice. Looking forward, you've been here since roughly 2018, a little bit longer if you count, your experiences with cannabis. What are some of the trends that you're noticing in 2025 that are kind of raising some flags for you that we need to be watching? What do you think in this industry?
And as far as raising flags, are we talking positives, negatives?
Positives, negatives. Yeah, raising a flag.
Cool. So some positives that I'm noticing, we were briefly touching on autoflowers earlier, and everything has their place. One thing I've noticed is outdoor farms and farms with a minimal staff or infrastructure. They are opting for these better high quality autoflowers to where it's just a lot less work, right? You need a lot less input to get the output that you seek. So that's one thing I've noticed, and I don't see that trend slowing down whatsoever. I think that's positive. I think it's a smart pivot for small farmers with maybe a larger footprint than, one or however many people can handle. So I love that. I also love a lot of the triploid work that I see being done. One group, Trilogene out of Colorado, does an amazing job. I'm working with their sour brie mix triploid right now. And as a breeder, it's really cool because prior to working with any triploids, everything in my tent that was in there is getting seeded, right? Because I'm pollinating all the females. But having this triploid in the tent, I'll be able to have a plant in there that is unaffected by the pollen and will provide me some smokable flower. So that's super cool. Triploids they obviously can't be used in breeding. They're sterile when it comes to that respect. But yeah, I see more and more growers opting for triploid cannabis as well, especially at scale. The tissue culture game, and sourcing clones from the Gen 0 state rather than, the traditional cloning and clone swapping. I think that is a growing trend that we're going to see move forward. I don't know how far that it's going to be taken, if it's just going to be a situation where it's what it is now, where it's a place where you can store genetics on a long-term basis, a place where you can out-clone HLV and you can get your clones clean again, or if it develops into something more where the industry starts to use TC more. But I definitely see a lot of interest in that area. And you can get the sort of general feel from a few of those trends that cannabis growers are looking for optimization at scale. They're looking for what's clean. They're looking to refine the industry. We've long been in a place in decades past where we were just doing what we could. And now we're in a place where we can do more than that. And I think that though it comes with some reluctance, we should welcome it. Embracing both the legacy things that we know are tried and true and optimizing that with, modern technology and traditional horticulture practices. That's where we're going to see some improvement in the cannabis industry in the coming years. And yeah, between autoflowers and the triploid use, I think those are two of the hottest things that we're going to see trending upward.
Yeah, I love it. We've been going for almost an hour here, so let's start to unwind this a little bit.
Oh my goodness. Time flies when you're fun.
Well, we've been having a good discussion. I think we went down some angles that I didn't previously anticipate, and you were saying some things that really got me going, thinking too. But I definitely appreciate you coming on, Anthony Domangue. He is the co-founder and CEO, correct, of Southern Roots Genetics.
That's right.
So I'll definitely make sure to leave all your contact information, way to get in touch with you in the video description. And if you're on the podcast, I'll just be sure to search up Southern Ridge Genetics. But a few more fun questions to kind of wrap this up for you. First of all, I'm curious about your first time trying cannabis, losing your virginity. What was that like?
That was crazy. So, the first time I smoked, I really don't even count it almost. But the first time I got high, I will tell you about that was the second time I smoked. First time I actually got the effects of cannabis, I was just at a little house party, very small group of friends. We were outside playing pong, and my buddy who I had been playing basketball with since we were in middle school, he had a blunt and handed it my way, and he was like, "You gonna hit that?" And I almost kind of testing me because he had never seen me smoke.
No, I don't want to smoke.
I was like, of course. So I freaking take that boy, rip it really hard, and that was the beginning of the end for me. I felt amazing. I was like, wow, this is a whole new world. I feel great. My head's clear. I feel like my head's actually functioning on a different gear, a higher gear. So yeah, it was an excellent time. And from there, I would say became more of a chronic smoker, made it more regular. From that point, it started being a couple times a week. Then it was a little bit more, but just the more I noticed that it was benefiting me, the more I felt drawn to it.
Yeah.
And the more I tried to, be exposed to it, the more I was open to disproving all the positive stuff that people said about cannabis. I was ready for it. I was ready to call BS because I grew up in that, and I still to this day, I have the pros way outweigh the cons. The cons are so few, and it's improved my life and so many other people's life.
100%. Absolutely. You gave me some deja vu there. I remember one of my first times smoking cannabis, I was sitting in a chair and I had a speaker behind me, and I felt like the music was massaging my back.
That's awesome. I can feel the vibes, man. It's real. It's really all I'm saying.
These days, you come a long way since those first times, those first experiences. What's your favorite way to consume these days? Do you have a favorite product, a favorite strain? What do you do these days?
For sure. Favorite method of consumption these days is definitely going to be through glass or paper. I like both because I certainly get nuances in paper that I don't get in glass, just because you're obviously just cooking it with the flame. You get more of those monoterpenes that are burned off in the bowl. So I typically use those two. Right after my neck break, it was exclusively the bong and topical creams. I would just topical cream my neck and use the bong for a systemic feel. I'm not so big on the blunts anymore. When I first started smoking, for the longest while, I was so into blunts, and I have since put that off. Don't judge anybody who does, but just for my own health, I was noticing it was messing with my lungs. So I just went to a cleaner option in the papers, and it's been cool. Not that papers are perfect, because I totally, at the commercial level, I got really pissed when a certain brand I won't name made my pre-rolls test negative for heavy metals. So you just got to really be careful out there with pre-rolls too.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So it's because of the fact everybody's like, oh, I want organic. I want hemp papers, right? But some of these hemp farms, they've been growing in soil that's not totally, been worked and been made clean again, or that's heavy metal laden. Cannabis being a phytoremediator is just going to pull that heavy metal right up into the flower or into the fiber even.
Yeah, that's crazy though. It probably is one of the growers at one of those farms. That's one of the last things I would consider. Oh, I wonder if metal's getting into our hemp somehow. Who knows if they know?
It was a huge problem when the legalization first rolled out, and farmers were like, "I'm going to go freaking crazy with this." Then everything tested for heavy metals. Now we have problems. But what's your favorite method of smoking or of using, I should say, cannabis?
Yeah, nobody asked me. But basically, I'm similar to you in that, I got to the point where smoking kind of impacted my lungs a little bit. And so I recently, like I said, like a few years ago, I learned how to make my own oils, just making it, baking it in the oven, and then all of a sudden synthesizing, or what's the word, combining that with oils and then consuming it that way. It's my preferred way these days. It kind of takes out the fun of the strains and the different types of strains.
Anything oral though, that really like has a long lasting effect. So it's very medicinal, the oils and oral products.
Yeah, I think that the art kind of moves over to mastering what the dosing is, especially when you're just like making it at home, like what I would do. It's like how do you know the percentages and whatever? And so you just start really small. And, sometimes, I've made some batches. We're going on a tangent here. They can make your heart just go pop, 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 pop. Not super, super fun. And so, there is a lot of value in still, just working with the professionals and just doing the professional products for sure. Last question for you, Anthony. Looking forward to the next 4 or 5 years into your crystal ball, seeing what what you've seen over at Southern Ridge Genetics. What's going to be the future of the cannabis industry for the next 4 or 5 years?
Well, I believe that there will be positives and negatives. I think that the grim reality is that as there are markets that continue to open up, places that, aren't fully legalized yet, that might only have medicinal and they're going to add rec or whatever, or even in these established markets like where I am in Missouri or in Cali or wherever, there's going to be consolidation. I believe that firmly. The way that things are structured at the moment, it does not make it easy for operators to do their job. And if you do it, you have to do it perfectly. It is hard to lose a run or to lose half of the money you were going to make on a run. And, everybody has investors. So the investors don't like hearing that. They don't like hearing about Hermia events and freaking mold events and things like that. So smaller operators who struggle to come out of the gates, blazing and just doing amazing with marketing, with their product, we really see like the quick decline of a lot of these smaller companies. And then we'll probably see consolidation and acquisition by bigger companies. I'm hopeful though for the continued education in the cannabis community to where we as growers just start to learn the value of growing in our area. California is definitely the furthest along there when it comes to appellations and terroir, similar to wine, where we would essentially, the concept is that you are the only one who can grow that variety with that expression because your unique environment and light intensity and all that creates the product and makes it what it is. Cushman's on your mountain will be different than mine. So it's this continued education of what terroir and appellation programs can do for growers so that as these, consolidations of smaller companies happen and these acquisitions by bigger businesses happen, we still have small farmers out there who are able to compete by adding value to their land and to their product via these appellation programs. California is definitely the furthest along, and it's just in its infancy. I did a little talk with Kevin Jodrey on this that you can find on YouTube, but it's going to be one of the biggest things that the small farmer can do to stay alive as time passes is really just prove to everybody, look, that MSO or whatever, like they can't make what I can make here. Doesn't matter if they have my strain, doesn't matter if they have my, just using the same fertilizer, they can't recreate this farm. So they in turn cannot recreate this product.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Great advice. Great predictions. It's maybe a little grim, but actually it's a little bit more realistic and rational too. So, but thanks again, Anthony, for coming on. Definitely wish you all the best. We'll be in contact. Let's find some new ways to collaborate. Maybe we'll circle back around. Maybe we'll share some contacts with each other, that sort of stuff. But in any case, thanks for coming on, sharing just a little bit of your knowledge, and I definitely wish you all the best and look forward to see what you do in the future.
Hey, Sam, it's been awesome. I've loved talking. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sam here. Thanks again for listening to the GDM podcast. So we do websites and SEO for cannabis brands and operators, and we do things a little bit differently here at GDM where we can promise results within weeks rather than months. And so if you're looking to sell more ounces, bongs, other premium products, start selling some more weed, get in touch with us at Green Dispensary Marketing to learn more. Thanks again for listening and hope you have a great day.